Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the March 2022 edition of Socialism for All, and it's an audiobook and discussion of Against Pessimism by Antonio Gramsci from 1924. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon at patreon.com/socialismforall. There's a link to Patreon in the video description. So this file is hosted at the Marxists Internet Archive, marxists.org. Home to this and thousands of other free Marxist texts. Please go check them out. Their source is antoniogramsci.com. It was first published in L'Ordine Nuovo, 15 March 1924, and translated by Natalie Campbell. Let's get into the text. There can be no better way to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the Communist International, the great worldwide association of which we, us revolutionary Italians, feel more than ever an active and integral part of, than to take a look at ourselves. We should take a look at the little that we have done and the enormous amount of work we still have left to do. This should help to dissipate the thick, dark cloud of pessimism, which is oppressing the most able and responsible militants, and is in itself a great danger. It may in fact be the greatest danger that we face at present, given that its consequences are political passivity, intellectual slumber, and skepticism about the future. This pessimism is closely linked to the current situation in which our country finds itself. The situation explains it to a certain extent, but of course does not justify it. What difference would there be between us and the Socialist Party, between our will and the party's tradition, if we also knew how to work and were only actively optimistic in periods when the cows were plump, when the situation was favorable? What difference would there be between us if we were only actively optimistic when the working masses advanced of their own accord, because of an impulse they could not fight, and the proletarian parties could take up a prime position and grab hold of the reins of their own accord? We have our own things to take into account, our own points of view, a greater sense of responsibility, and we must show that we have such. The real worry of having to get organizational forces and suitable materials ready, which will adorn every event, but what difference would there be between us and the Socialist Party if we lapsed into fatalism? What if we fooled ourselves under the sweet illusion that events could only follow a certain sequence, as we predicted, in which they would inevitably run into the dikes and channels that we've constructed? What if they were directed by these, and took historical form and power in them? This is the knot of the problem, which is in a complete tangle, because from the outside, passivity seems to be an active effort, because it seems that there is a line of development, a tradition in which workers are meritoriously sweating away, but getting tired of dragging at. The Communist International was founded on the 5th of March, 1919, but its ideological and systemic formation only took place at the Second Congress, in July and August 1920, with the approval of the Constitution and the 21 Conditions. In Italy, a campaign for the redevelopment of the Socialist Party began as a direct cause of the Second Congress. That is to say, this time, it started on a national scale. It had already come into being in March of the previous year because of the Turin subdivision, with the motion being drawn up for the party's imminent national congress that should have been held in the city, but that did not have any notable consequences. It was at the abstentionist faction's conference in Florence, held in July 1920, before the Second Congress, that they rejected the proposal made by a representative of the New Order. The proposal had been to enlarge the foundation of the faction, making it a communist one, without abstentionist prejudice that in practice had lost a great part of its reason. The Livorno Congress and the split which took place there was drawn upon by the Second Congress, by the 21 Conditions. It was shown to be the necessary conclusion to the, quote, formal deliberations of the Second Congress. This was a mistake, and today we can evaluate the far-reaching consequences that this had. Truthfully, the deliberations of the Second Congress were a living interpretation of the Italian situation and the situation in which the whole world found itself. But we, for a number of reasons, did not decide to act out of what happened in Italy, from Italian facts which proved the Second Congress right. This was despite the fact that they were a part, and one of the most important ones at that, of the political matter that motivated the decisions and the organizational measures taken by the Second Congress. We instead limited ourselves to making formal issues a priority, issues of pure logic, pure coherence, yet we were overcome because most of the politically organized proletariat disagreed with us. They wouldn't come with us, though we had both authority and international prestige on our side, which were both great and were factors on which we had relied. We didn't know how to lead a systemic campaign, a campaign that could reach to and force a reflection on the core and constituent elements of the Socialist Party. We did not know how to translate into a language understandable to every worker and Italian peasant the meaning of every one of the Italian events from 1919 to 1920. After Livorno, we were not capable of working out exactly why the Congress had reached such a conclusion. We didn't know how to look at the problem practically, so that we could find a solution to it, so that we could continue on our specific mission, to win over the majority of the Italian population. We were, it must be said, overwhelmed by events. We were, without wanting to be, part of the general division of Italian society, which had become an incandescent melting pot, into which all traditions, all historical formulations, all prevailing ideas were thrown, without leaving a trace. We did, however, have one consolation, which we clung on to, that nobody had been saved from this fate, that we could have absolutely pinpointed this catastrophe when others were continuing, happily but foolishly unaware. After the split at Livorno, we entered into a state of necessity. There is only one way in which we can justify our actions and activities after the split at Livorno. It was out of simple yet intense necessity, the dilemma of life or death. We had to organize ourselves into a coherent party in the depths of civil war, bringing together our factions with the blood of the most devoted militants. We had to transform, through training and enlistment, our factions into contingents for the guerrilla, the most atrocious and difficult guerrilla that the working class had ever had to fight. We did, however, succeed. The party was created, and created on strong foundations, an army of steel, certainly too small to be able to enter into battle against opposing forces, but just big enough to become the framework of something greater, the framework of an army that, to refer to talk in historical Italian terms, can ensure that the Battle of the Piave will follow a similar route to that of Caporetto. This is the current problem that we face, inexorably. We must put together a great army ready for the upcoming battles, bring one together from the forces that, from Livorno to the present day, have shown that they know how to hold strong, without hesitating or taking steps back from the attack so fervently put forth by fascism. The development of the Communist International after the Second Congress has given us the land which is right for what it understands once again as the situation and the needs of the Italian situation. It has taken into account the deliberations of the Third and Fourth Congresses, together with those of the enlarged plenums which took place in February and June 1922 and June 1923. The truth is that we, as a party, have already taken some steps forward in this direction. We have nothing left to do but to take note of what we have done so far and to bravely continue. What do these events, which unraveled at the core of the Socialist Party, really mean? Firstly, there was the split from the reformists. Secondly, the exclusion of the editors of the Pagine Rosse, and then the attempt, third and finally, to exclude the Third Internationalist faction. And in fact, these events have a very clear meaning. While our party was forced, as the Italian section, to limiting its activity to the physical fight, to defending ourselves against fascism, and to maintaining its rudimentary structure, as an international party, we were working and continuing to work, trying to open new roads towards the future, to widen our circle of political influence, to pull from neutrality that part of the throng that before had looked on with indifference, somewhat hesitant. The action of the International was, for some time, the only one which allowed our party to have effective contact with the wider masses, which helped to feed the ferment of debate and the beginnings of a movement for a large proportion of the working class. For us, this would have been impossible, given the current situation, to achieve otherwise. It has undoubtedly been a great achievement to have plucked factions from the Socialist Party. A great achievement, given that when the situation seemed even worse, units were created from the formless socialist gel. They proved there was still faith, despite everything which had gone on, in the world revolution. These units, through events which seemed to burn brighter than words themselves, have recognized that they made mistakes in 1920, 21, and 22. This was a defeat of fascism and the reaction. It was, if we wish to be truthful, the only physical and ideological defeat of fascism and of the reaction in these 3 years of Italian history. It is necessary to react with vigor against the pessimism of some groups in our party, even if they are some of the most reliable and skilled amongst us. This is, at the current time, the greatest danger within the new situation that is being created in our country. It will find approval and justification in the first fascist legislature. The great battles are drawing closer, battles which will perhaps be more bloody and harder than those of previous years. With that in mind, all the energy of our leaders will be needed, the best form of organization and concentration of the party's mass, a great spirit of initiative, and a great rapidity of response. Pessimism more or less takes this form. We return to a pre-Livorno situation. We will have to carry out once more the work which we carried out before Livorno, and that we believed was finished. We must show every comrade how politically and theoretically wrong this position is. Clearly, we will also need to fight hard. Clearly, the task of our party's core contingent, established at Livorno, is still not over, and it will not be for a long time yet. It will still be intense and current after the victory of revolution. But we will no longer be in a pre-Livorno situation, because the world and Italian situation is not, in 1924, the same situation as that of 1920. We ourselves are no longer the people that we were in 1920, and we would never want to be them again, because the Italian working class has changed a great deal, and it will no longer be the easiest task getting them to reoccupy the factories with stovepipes in place of cannons, after having deafened them and made their blood boil with the vile demagogy of the maximalist beasts. Because our party exists, and that is something in itself, it is in that which we have never-ending faith as the better, most sound, most honest part of the Italian proletariat. And that's the end of the audiobook. So just to recap, some of what's being described here is the early years of struggle in terms of founding the Italian Communist Party, particularly in the face of the rise of fascism in Italy. So World War I went from 1914 to 1918. Tsarist Russia took part in that war, and of course in 1917 the Tsar was deposed, and the Russian communists were able to turn that imperialist war into a war against the bourgeoisie. And they did, and the Russian Revolution, the October Revolution of 1917, was the result. Then, of course, civil war followed to try to defend the revolution and establish a new socialist order, which, of course, was successful and resulted in the founding of the USSR. However, around the same time, there were less successful attempts at doing the same thing in other countries, including Germany and Italy. We have a playlist on the channel to the effect of understanding fascism and right-wing social, political, economic movements, and several of the videos in that playlist go into the specifics of the situation in Italy around 1920, the end of the war, in greater detail. Basically, understanding fascism not just as a punitive response, not just intended to punish the working class, not just a punitive response from the bourgeoisie and other reactionary, remnants of feudalism, other classes which are counter-revolutionary, opposed to socialism. It's not just intended to punish the proletariat, but also to establish a kind of alternative order in the face of a failed revolution, or like a near miss. The bourgeoisie and other elements of reaction say, whoa, that was close, we got to do something. Fascism is one of the answers that they have developed to when there is almost a revolution. So in Italy, under Socialist Party leadership, there was a moment, a revolutionary moment, that the working class, with particularly the bad leadership of the Italian socialists, was not able to realize fully. And so the moment passed, and then fascism came to fill the void of, this radical moment that the working class didn't, again, fully realize. So fascism comes along and says, okay, we're going to rally around national unity, and we have, XYZ scapegoats. The working class will get, or at least will be promised, certain reforms and new rights, and the bourgeoisie will be reined in a little bit in the name of national unity, although in reality what actually happens is this whole movement is controlled by the big bourgeoisie, and all of the sort of populist rhetoric basically amounts to bullshit in the end. So anyway, it's in this moment where Mussolini and the fascists come to power that the communists are trying to figure out what to do. Meanwhile, Lenin, the Bolsheviks, and other like-minded communists are forming the Third Communist International and formulating the terms to which Marxist parties need to adhere to be admitted into the Communist International. These became referred to as the 21 conditions, referenced in this file here. You can also find on the channel a file from 1920 by Lenin, Terms of Admission into the Communist International. At that time, in July, they were 19 terms of admission when they were actually passed the following month, again, 21. But as far as the situation at Livorno and what Gramsci is writing about the pre-Livorno and post-Livorno situation, Livorno was the site of a conference of the Italian Socialist Party early in 1921, January 1921 to be specific, where the Italian socialists refused to ratify the terms of admission into the Comintern. Then the majority that were in favor of ratifying those terms split off and formed the Italian Communist Party. These, of course, included Gramsci. So anyway, that's a little bit more context. As far as the content, what do you think? Leave a question or a comment below. We'll continue the discussion in the comments section as always. Until then, thanks for listening. Thanks to the current patrons also, whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month or more. Every donation is encouraging. They're also materially helpful, so thank you very much. All of the patrons have enabled me to produce a lot more content for this channel than I would have been able to do otherwise. So if you like this channel, thank me, but thank a patron as well. Other ways of helping out include liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving comments, even if they're just thanks or good video. All of that engagement helps to boost the video in the YouTube algorithm, helps new people to see the content. The channel has been growing, so thanks to everybody who engages in those forms of support as well. Otherwise, thanks again for listening, and we will catch you in the next video.